Well, hey,
Man,
garden
you
of
and
the
me,
mug.
aren't we just two peas in a pod? Heck yeah.
Exactly.
Welcome to Folk Artwork and Friends. Not bad. All right, maybe we'll season two. We do seasons? I don't think so. Of the theme song for Folk Artwork Friends. Probably not, but that's okay. Anyways, welcome back. Thank you to everybody for being here. Thank you to everybody for the kind words that have been coming and subscribing and liking and sharing and the reviews and everything for the Folk Artwork and Friends podcast that has been happening this summer. It is Art Environment Summer, and we've got another great interview coming to you that I'm very excited to share with you. I have talked so far this summer with Joe Farb Hernandez about her art environment work, her documentation, and the books that she's written about the art environments in Spain. That's a great interview. If you've not heard that, go check that out. We've also talked to Ricky Boscarino of Luna Park, who has an unbelievable, one-of-a-kind, out-of-this-world house and home and art environment that he so graciously walked us through. And today, I'm really excited to continue Art Environment Summer with my good friend, Narrow Larry Harris, of Narrow Larry's World of the Outstanding. I can't quite remember when and where and how I first met Larry. Unfortunately, we've never met in person, but we met online. I must have been going to his amazing website, which again, narrowlarry.com. And I might have sent him an email about wanting to go to one of these places, and we have just been friends ever since. I'm in the greatest group chat ever, full of people documenting art environments and sharing their trips and photos and tips and things about where they are heading. And it's all because I think of Larry. And Larry has been a great mentor to me and help for whenever I'm going somewhere or have questions about art environments. He has been extremely helpful and generous with his time, and I can't thank him enough. I talked to Larry about his start of this, how he got into documenting these environments, the Watts Towers, which I finally got to go see, and just can't describe the feeling and the incredible just experience of being there. So thank you to him for talking about that and so much more, including the tours that he would do, Dr. Charles Smith, and just sort of the best way to support these artists in these art environments. So I'm very happy and very excited to share with you my conversation with Larry Harris.
Without going into too much detail, how do I look for a Zoom,
You look great.
podcast?
Yes, you look great. I love the background. I like the shirt.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you look good. It's good to see you in the flesh. It's
Good to see you.
nice to chat with you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you. How are
So
things in Houston?
things are good. Let me crank up the volume just a tad more. So I've got a very a low budget setup here.
Hey.
During COVID, I did not do any Zooming.
Well, unfortunately, I did, but
Okay.
but my setup is not that much more advanced. So do not worry.
Right.
I can see you, I can hear you. That's all that matters. I do have this podcast microphone only because it's just like I think it's my generation where it's just my dream has been to have a podcast. I've done like two or three of them,
Uh-huh.
and so I thought I needed to get a nice, good microphone. But otherwise, you and me were on the same page, so do not worry.
Well, I feel a little guilty. I think I mentioned in our conversation a couple weeks ago. I haven't had a chance to listen to many of the pod. I've listened to a couple, but
That's all
I've
right.
just checked, and you have like 8 or 9 now.
Got
Um,
8 or 9 now. Yeah. And you know what? I'm really, really excited. This summer vacation. So, I last time we chatted, It was that Friday. I was at work, but no
Uh-huh.
kids were there, so it
Right.
was more than fine that we could chat for an hour or so. And since then, you are the fourth interview that I've done since then, and I got one more scheduled for next week. Then I'm heading
Excellent.
out to Los Angeles, and I'm hoping to get a bunch more. Again, like I said, I kind of always wanted to do this a podcast. I never really knew what to do, but I've met so many people in sort of my journeys of going to the art fair, being sort of in the art environment world, where you lie, just meeting a ton of people. And we talk briefly at like an event, you say hey, and then maybe you say like something on Instagram like cool, nice post, but you just don't really get a chance to meet people.
Right.
And
Exactly.
unfortunately, you and me have had some really great conversations, but I feel like my generation, it's like, oh, I'll do a podcast. And now I can actually sit down and record this and talk to people. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I talked last week with Joe Farb
I
Hernandez.
was going to
Uh,
ask you. Yeah.
yeah, or the publisher sent me this book
Love
with
it.
the amazing photos from Fred, and I got to chat
Uh-huh.
with her. It's funny that you kind of mentioned that there's just a lot going on, so I'm not offended at all that you've not listened to any of the episodes. I remember working at a football game for school when I was teaching, and we have to work football games here and there. And I remember a Friday night, this was about a year or two ago, and this older gentleman, probably in his 70s, maybe close to 80, was like, "Hey, where is everybody?" And I'm like, it's not like it was 40, 50 years ago
Right.
where everybody on a Friday night would go to a high school football game.
Uh-huh.
Like, unfortunately, there's other things going on, and we just don't sort of have that monoculture anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I love that this world, this outsider art and the art environments have kind of has its own little community that you've helped cultivate. And so, yeah, so Joe Farb, she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I did not know who you were, but somebody sent me your newsletter
Right.
because I had made a post about this book." So I got to chat with her. She was in Spain. That was fantastic. And then just yesterday, I talked with Ricky Boscarino
Wow.
from Luna Park, and he gave me an incredible tour of his just extraordinary home.
And
Just
then, unfortunately, I've never had a chance to go up
Oh,
and
you
visit.
haven't? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are some, obviously, as you know, you'll be able to tell that being there in person is unlike anything else, but there's some really cool videos on YouTube of him doing some walkthroughs. And despite some spotty Wi-Fi yesterday, I got to see some really cool things in his house. And he just continues he was like in the process of working on it while we were talking. Then he was going to go back and work on it. It was really, really cool and really fun to talk with him.
And Ricky, I believe, is one of the quote unquote youngsters of the environment builders because, as you know, it
He is.
skews older, and unfortunately, we're skewing losses in the
Yeah.
world too.
Yeah. That's why, after chatting with you a couple weeks ago, that talking about how just it is important what we are doing is sort of like capturing these and taking photos, but really it's all about the artist, right? And
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
after we had that conversation, I really wanted to hear because I knew I was going to talk to Joe Farb Hernandez and I wanted to talk to you, but then also an artist that is doing this, and like you said, he's one of the younger ones, and I got a chance to meet him in New York a couple of months ago at the Outsider Art Fair. I told him then, and it still rings true. It was like one of the highlights of the
Uh-huh.
Outsider Art Fair. I met some amazing people, saw some amazing artwork, but like he came up and he's like, Adam. I'm like, Ricky. And it was just a blast. So, yeah, so getting a chance to talk with him and just hearing his life story and seeing his space is really incredible.
Well, I'm definitely looking
It was
forward to
great.
his interview as well as Joe Farb's as well,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is kind of the podcast. Like I'm already recording. It's
Okay.
very low key, casual. Of course, I'll introduce. I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking here to Larry Harris. I know you and call you to everybody as Narrow Larry. Do you want to explain a little bit kind of where that Narrow Larry came from? Because if you haven't yet, and I tell people, everybody, go to narrowlarry.com before you go anywhere in the world. to see if there's an art environment by you. But where did that narrow Larry come from?
So to start with, I'm not quite as narrow as I used to be in my youth. I'm 64 now,
You and
but
me both.
if we were to time travel back to the early 1990s, I was working for a corporate architecture firm here in Houston, and one of the principals was also named Larry. Now, Larry, his weight may have been a little bit above mine, so
Okay.
he stayed Larry, and I became Narrow Larry.
Okay.
And so that kind of stuck with me amongst friends for years and years. And when in 2002, when I launched my website, I thought, well, why the heck not? Why not name it, Narrow Larry something? And it
Yeah.
became, Narrow Larry's World of the Outstanding.
Fantastic. That's hilarious. And I mean, I would say your view of the world of the outstanding is not narrow at all. Like you have
No.
done and captured so much incredible work. So again, for anybody who doesn't know, you for the past 20, 30 years or so, almost 40 years,
Well, yeah, yeah, 40 years in the field.
have
Yeah.
been documenting art environments across the country, but also the world, right?
I've been to Europe a couple times,
Okay.
but that's mainly for kind of architectural pilgrimages, and those were in the early '90s when I did several trips to Europe. So that's my dream is to make it to France, make it to all these other
Hmm.
countries with just huge density. Finland, who knew that Finland would have
Sure,
that
sure.
kind of density of environments, but they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the kind of the origin story of
I
how
would
I
love
got into
to.
this.
Yeah, I think I was actually reading, again, I've been I just again wanted to start off the bat. I've been very fortunate to know you for a couple of years now, and
Yeah. Mhm.
you've been very helpful for me when I'm like anytime I'm like, hey, I'm about to go so and so, or you're like, hey, go check out these spaces. So it's been really great, and I really appreciate the
Thank you.
friendship and the almost mentorship that you've been able to lend to me and to a lot of people. We are in. I feel like I feel bad because I'm not as active in it, but I'm in like one of the greatest group chats of all time, which is you, and all these people: Kelly Ludwig, Fred
Kelly,
Scruton, a couple other
Freddie,
people, Freddie, Art Root
Greg,
Vegan on Instagram. So many
Steve.
really, yeah. Again, and it keeps growing. I love that you keep adding and adding. You're like, hey, it's Art Environment or Road Trip 9.0 now, and I've
Right.
been very fortunate to be in that group, which is just constantly sending like, hey, I'm going here, or hey, look at this new place, or hey, has anybody checked this out? Which has been
Oh, we
really
forgot about
fun.
Erica. Erica too.
Erica, yes, from
Yes.
Kohler.
World's yeah. Well,
Yes.
world's largest, so on and so forth.
Yes, yes, exactly. But I was kind of reading last night. I found an interview that you did that so one of the first sort of art environments or art, one of these I don't know what exactly we want to call it, but the Orange Show, someone like invited you to it and you were kind of like, I don't really know about this. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, to go back a few years prior to
Sure,
that,
sure.
I have sort of two parallel origin stories with
Let's do
environments.
it. Yeah.
So the first started around it was either 1973 or 74. I was around 11 or 12 years old, and my brother Charles gave me it was either a Christmas or birthday present, and it was a book called Shelter. So
Okay.
Shelter was a publication from the Whole Earth Catalog, which you might be familiar with. Whole Earth Catalog was considered one of the holy books of the counterculture era of the 1960s.
Okay,
I mean, it
cool.
dealt with, as one of the books to dwell on, do it yourself, whatever, eco-friendly construction, eco-friendly farming. And I think, as I recall, Steve Jobs pointed to that as his kind of one of his, origin books too. He said it was kind of the paperback Google. So
Interesting. Yeah.
anyway, there was a side publication titled Shelter, which came out I think around 1973, and this it was a gift from my brother. He gave it to me, and because he knew I'd always been interested in architecture as a kid, Lego
Hmm.
blocks, Tinker Toys, etc. So it was interesting to me. But thumbing through it, there was a fascinating article for me as a 11 or 12-year-old, and it was about a place in Los Angeles called the Watts Towers. And these weren't sharply defined photo reproductions in the book, but there
Hmm.
was a couple of images and about a half page of text. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I didn't understand what it was really about, or I had
Sure.
no clue, but it stuck in my head. And so, fast forward to about 15 years, late 1980s, I graduated from architecture school here at the University of Houston. And one Sunday morning, I received a phone call from two good friends of mine, classmates of mine from architecture school, Joe and Annette Montante. They were two kids originally from Pennsylvania. They didn't know each other up there, but they met down here in Houston, and they eventually got married. And they said, "Hey, Larry, last weekend we went to this place near the University of Houston campus called the Orange Show, and we're going back out again today. We were wondering if you might be interested in joining us because we think you'd really like it."
Yeah.
And so I had heard of the Orange Show during the early 80s. It had gotten some local TV coverage and newspaper coverage. But I was so obsessed with modern architecture,
Yeah.
clean contemporary architecture. And I had heard of it about that. To me, it seemed like some sort of hokey, corny kids amusement park.
Sure.
So I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm probably busy today." He says, "No, no, Larry, you'll really like it. Trust us." So I was kind of reluctantly, dragged along. Anyway, when we pulled up there and they picked me up and we pulled up there on Munger Street in front of the Orange Show, and I thought, oh, huh, okay. And I walked in, and I'll get choked up here. I swear I'll get choked up. I walked in the entry gate, and you're immediately surrounded by this different world. And it instantly got to me. I instantly connected with it. That was the
Uh-huh.
key thing. And the key thing for me was I was seeing it. I didn't see it as anything kind of wacky or whimsical. I saw it as architecture. And that was the key in for me. Because I wasn't really, the Orange Show has all these wonderful mosaic proverbs written in the
Mm-hmm.
walls, and it has wonderful little bird whirligigs. But I was looking at the spaces, and I was looking at the circulation systems, which there are many throughout the Orange Show. So it's that connection that did for me. I sometimes say that if my first encounter with an environment would have been the beer can house here in Houston, as much as I
Sure.
love the beer can house, but the beer can house is more about embellishment. I mean, it's literally a working class wood frame bungalow, covered with cut up beer cans,
Yeah.
and it's a magical place. But it just wouldn't have had the same impact for me. Um, and the other key thing was, luckily, the Orange Show had been preserved and was now being maintained by the Orange Show Foundation. And so after we were wrapping things up, our tour, and I noticed they had some materials there for,
Mm-hmm.
the exit. And one was the Orange Show Foundation newsletter. And then I took it home and I looked and I said, and it mentioned, oh, if you're interested in the Orange Show, check out these other resources. And there was Seymour Rosen Spaces was listed. And also another key early resource was the Kansas Grassroots Art Association.
Okay.
And they had the KGAA newsletter. And that was a group of volunteers who initially were, gotten together because of the Garden of Eden.
Right.
And I think most of that crew was from well, hey,
Man,
Garden
you
of
and
Eden
me,
mug.
aren't we just two peas in a pod? Heck yeah.
Exactly. That's
I know.
kind of scary.
I was like searching all over for my Garden of Eden coffee mug right before this call. Sorry to cut you off.
No, no, no. So with those two resources, and again, this would have been 1988. So with those two resources, you can't jump on. There was no
Right.
internet.
Right.
You had to go to, like the public library or a university library to start researching this stuff. So one of the first things I did was wrote a letter to, by the way, this is my splinted finger if you wonder what's going on
Yeah,
there.
sorry about
Hopefully
that.
that comes off soon. So I wrote a letter to Seymour Rosen out in Los Angeles with spaces. And there was a membership, it was like $35,
Hmm.
get the Spaces newsletter. So I did that, introduced myself and so on. But at that point, I had not done any traveling at all. I mean,
Okay.
geez, I didn't fly my first plane until 1989, the next year. I'm a Texas country boy.
Yeah.
So anyway, at the time I had started work at a corporate architecture firm, but as soon as I could afford it, I started, wanting to go on road trips. And of course, as you know, I do a lot of planning. I'll do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
research.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next year I started to, LA was my first kind of trip, one of my first trips out of Texas. And I knew I wanted to see all this stuff around the country. And along with that was my paired obsession with modern architecture.
Yeah.
And as I'm sure you know, the American Midwest is just packed with just all these icons of architecture, Frank Lloyd Wright,
Yep.
Louis Sullivan, on down the list.
Mm-hmm.
So, as soon as I could, I started taking cheap Southwest Air flights out of Houston, which you could back then, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
fly to, my hub would be like Tulsa or St. Louis or Minneapolis. Rent a car, and for over a very packed, like 4 day long weekend, I would just hit site after site after site. I could hit Frank Lloyd Wright's house, Taliesin, and then 45 minutes later, I'd be at like the Forevertron or the Dickeyville
Mm-hmm.
Grotto.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that. For me, I mean, that was my pairing. I can't imagine doing one without the other. And I still stress that to people who say, either folk art friends who say, "Oh, I'm going to Iowa." So, okay, well, if you're going to go to see the Grotto of the Redemption, you must go see a Louis Sullivan Bank in,
Yeah.
Grinnell.
Yeah.
Or to my folk art world friends, I say, "Okay, well, you've got to see all these icons. If you're going to see Dr. Charles Smith's site, you have to go on down the road to see Mies van der Rohe's Farnsworth House. You cannot not see them both."
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I started I was just briefly mention,
Yeah. No, keep
a few years
going.
later.
I'm loving every
Oh,
second of
thank you,
this.
thank you. So a few years later, 10 years later, when I launched the website, I did it in those same terms. It was paired. It was like I didn't want you to, go onto a page and thinking, oh, this is just about folk art. There's, whimsical fonts or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to look kind of serious. So it's kind of A and B. There's architecture, and then there's, self-taught art environments.
Of course, too, we talked last time about cemeteries, right? Our love
Oh my God,
for
I love
cemeteries. So
places of rest.
there's something, I guess, so nostalgic, and I feel, it's amazing, and I love being able to go to your website, go to Spaces,
uh,
and look up these sites. But I don't know, there's something about thinking back to when you were doing this before the internet. You were either getting out maps, you were looking at encyclopedias, finding these
yeah,
random pictures that adds to that the hunt or the
right.
because once you get to most of these places, you're going down a gravel road. You're not entirely sure where you're gonna be, and then all of a
It,
sudden this space is there and it hits you. But I feel like even that adding that again, that extra hunt, that pre-step before the internet, there's something to that.
it's the magic of getting lost. It's just the magic of
Yes,
taking the wrong
yes,
turn.
yeah.
And unfortunately, we're too precise these days. We can go directly to, whatever satellite grotto that Father Doberstein did, and
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to get lost, unfortunately. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I mean, again, it's still fantastic to go to these spaces, and I think to your point, being sort of blown away, um every single one of them. I was talking to Joe Farb Hernandez about this. A lot of these spaces, especially in the Midwest, they're very
right,
religious.
right.
Not all are, but I feel like whatever your religion is, whether you're religious or not, there is some religious experience when you get to this space. So I know that Watts Towers is a huge one for you. Do you want
Yeah.
to talk about your first time going out to Watts Towers as I prepare and get ready to head out there next week?
Oh, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your trip.
Yeah.
So I was going out to LA pretty often in the early 1990s. I had a good friend who had moved out there, a classmate of mine. But I didn't visit the towers until I think it was about my third trip. For whatever reason, I just, didn't make it to the tower. Well, for one, it was under scaffolding a lot back
Oh,
then.
okay. Yeah.
And I thought, well, okay, apparent, it's under work. I'll go next trip. I'll go next trip. So and I'd already befriended Seymour Rosen at this point, and he said,
That's right.
hey, hey guy, let me know when you're coming out here. We'll we'll go up to the towers together. So my first trip to the towers wasn't until 1993, I believe it was. And so me and my friend Nita, who lived out there, we hooked up with Seymour, and we all drove out there to the scaffoldless towers. The
Hmm.
scaffolds had come down at that point. And it was everything I had hoped it to be. The only thing, looking back at my photos, is like, God, if only I had a digital camera back then and could have
Yeah,
gotten like a
sure.
wide range shot. And the funny thing is, I haven't been back to the tower since then for
Oh,
whatever
wow.
reason. Yeah,
Yeah. And I want to talk about like the architecture of it. You mentioned like
right.
going to the Orange Show for you as coming from the architecture background, because when you get to these places, the first one that kind of immediately comes to my mind is Bishop Castle.
Oh yes.
Um, for you, is it kind of like, again, you're an architect, you know how buildings and these structures are built, but these are almost like dropped down from space where an alien
That's a
made
great.
these,
Yeah.
right? I mean, are you looking at them and like, how in the world does this connect to that or
Uh-huh.
go to there? Like, speak about the architecture of these places, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've always gravitated towards the more architectural environments. Just off the top of my head, besides the towers and the Orange Show, Margaret's Grocery in Vicksburg, the minefield in Tennessee. I love the minefield. I've always thought of the minefield as an environment that the great modern architect, Mies van der Rohe, would appreciate, because it's very much in his kind of structurally based skin and bones,
Hmm.
aesthetic.
Yeah.
I'm trying. You mentioned the castle, Bishop. The funny thing is, I've always had a little bit of a prejudice against the castle sites because I just, in my mind, it's like, well, it's just another castle. But
Yeah.
when I finally made it to Bishop and Kano's castle the same day, it's like,
Oh,
okay,
wow. Yeah.
I'm a believer now.
Yeah. Now,
Um,
how high did you get on Bishop's Castle?
I went pretty high.
Because,
I couldn't go there. I went in when was it, like the early or mid 2000s, and I
okay.
still look back at my photos, and I have one photo in which I'm peering down through an open grate and seeing my shoes there, and it's like, oh my God, I'm really high up. But I
Yeah.
don't think I could do that these days.
You're braver than me because I went and my 8-year-old is still mad at me for not letting him go up, up, and up. I think we went to like sort of that first level, and
Right.
even that's like almost 2 stories tall. And I mean, again, I was talking to Ricky Boscarino of Luna Park yesterday, and when you think about these structures too, a lot of them, he was telling me how his is not just at code, it's like over code. Like his
Right.
is so well constructed. And for him, he's thinking about it staying around forever. Like, so it is wild when you get to these places, you're kind of like, how is that connected and whatever.
Uh-huh.
But like these artists, they are building these things to last. I mean, they're gonna last longer than us, right?
Yes, and that goes back to kind of the famous story about how the Watts Towers were almost demolished, but luckily preserved. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've mentioned
Yeah.
that in past
Well,
podcasts,
no,
but
I haven't, and you were telling me about it. Could you mind telling that
sure.
story?
So the towers had started to get public attention, pretty early on. It was started in what 1921 is when Rodeo started construction, and he wrapped it up around 1954. Verify these dates, by the way.
Okay,
so
will do.
so it started getting some newspaper attention, especially in the 50s. And but then the city of Los Angeles was saying, hey, these things are unsafe, they're a public hazard, et cetera, et cetera. But luckily, a group of enlightened citizens, knew that it was a work of art and architecture that needed to be preserved. So there was a group called, I think, the Committee for Preservation of the Watts Towers, something to that effect.
Hmm.
And they went to the city and say, hey, you can't tear it down. So the city said, okay, well, you must prove to us that this is not a hazard, that it's
Hmm.
structurally sound.
Yeah.
So luckily, one of those committee members was an engineer, aerospace engineer named Bud Goldstone. He worked at what was one of the famous defense contractors back then. But anyway, Bud saw the value in the towers, and he said, well, let me think of something. So Bud came up with a test, a structural test, and he approached the city and says, hey, if we pass this test, can the tower stand? They said, okay. So, and there was a lot of press coverage. So they took as I recall, they took a tow truck with a wrench and they applied, several cables to key areas of, I think it was the middle height tower. I may have
Mm-hmm.
that wrong, but I think because the towers, the three main towers are 99 feet, I don't know, 78 feet and so on. I think this was applied to the middle tower. And anyway, so they attached these cables and started applying, weight or, I don't remember the term, but you know what I mean, like a
Yeah, yeah,
pressurized
yeah. Sure.
pull
Yep.
a force
Mm-hmm.
on those cables. And it, okay, it meets the first threshold. It meets the second threshold. It meets, and it still, no tile has
Right.
popped off.
Right.
And so it literally just say it passed with flying colors, all was good. And it was say, it's funny is going back to architecture, you may have heard of a famous incident where Frank Lloyd Wright's design for these mushroom columns in the Johnson Wax headquarters in Racine, Wisconsin. There are these tall, slender columns they're called mushroom columns because they had this kind
Mm-hmm.
of mushroom top. And the city of Racine said, these aren't going to pass our structural engineers looked at this. He's shaking his head. This isn't going to pass. So old Frank, goes out there with some work crews. They build, one of these columns, these tapered columns with a wide top, and they start loading sandbags on top. Okay, it passes with, X amount of weight, with two times that amount of weight, three
Uh-huh.
times and four times. And finally it buckled, but after passing it with, totally flying colors.
Yeah.
So anyway, that says that, Rodea, when he knew what he was doing, when he was constructing these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, first of all, you were absolutely correct. I don't even know why I had to look it up, Larry. It was 1921 to 1954. You still got your fastball there. You know exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, there's something to that. I love sort of I'm very fascinated with. I taught art history for a little while,
Right.
and especially with my two young boys, like we love reading about like the pyramids. We love
Right.
reading about these ancient structures that again, I try to tell my high school students and my kids, but like there's all these like theories that like, oh, aliens came down and they built the pyramids and they
Right.
did all these structures because there's no way that they could withstand
Uh-huh.
thousands of years. But it really kind of
Which of course is
discredits.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It totally discredits sort of not again, it's not simple, but like these guys and these artists, they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they create just again these structures that are going to live longer than us and just be around forever and ever.
Well, one of the biggest admirers of the towers was Buckminster Fuller. He loved because it was all about his kind of thing of interconnecting, structure,
Yeah.
using, basically a minimum of materials.
Yeah, sure.
Because the towers aren't these kind of pyramidal things of stone upon stone. They're very, it's relatively lightweight. It's rebar covered in, a coating of cement and, embellished with tiles, of course.
Yeah. It's incredible. I'm so excited to get out there and see it. But before I get out there to see it, as I continue to talk to you, I want to hear you were so kind of moved by Watts Towers that you created a scale model of Watts
This is
Towers
true.
back in the 90s, correct? And
Right.
it almost took you like a full year, not quite the 33 years that
Right.
Rodea did, but it almost took you a full year to make this.
Right. So that backstory is I was still working in a corporate architecture firm here in Houston.
Hmm.
There was a lot of work going on. I was working, weekends, late hours, but my mind was, I needed a break or something when I came home from work. And I always loved building models in architecture school. Loved, these very intricate, highly detailed, cardboard and wood models.
Hmm.
So I don't know what sparked this, but I thought, well, I wonder if I could build a model of the Watts Towers. So the first thing I thought I could do was, okay, I'll do a test, kind of like what Rodea did. I'll build a one tower test. And so I got, basswood, it's denser than balsa wood. So it's basswood verticals. And I started wrapping it in these kind of, the hoops were
Uh-huh.
made out of a material called museum board, which is a heavier weight. So that's what the structure of my little model tower is, this kind of basswood and cardboard. And then I lathering it in a soupy mixture of gesso and watered down plaster. And I was literally just kind of dripping that over these, things. And all this is joined together with Elmer's glue. So
Hmm.
the model was at a quarter scale. Um, Overall, the long, it's a triangular lot, and so
Yeah.
the model is triangular. So the long side, the hypotenuse, is approximately, I want to say, it's not quite 3 feet. It's about, say, 2.5 feet.
Okay.
And the tallest tower was about, what was it? That about 2 feet, maybe? I can't recall at a quarter scale.
Incredible.
So after a year, that's what I produced, and I'll always be very thankful that Seymour was able to see the progress, because without Seymour and Bud Goldstone, they supplied me with vintage archival photos
Right,
of kind of
right.
like back of the house stuff that's like nobody's ever going to take a picture of this portion of the towers. And they also supplied me with site measurements that had been taken over the years. And without their input, it would have been okay, but it wouldn't have been accurate. And my model, I am proud to say, is pretty darn accurate.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And it's currently is it up at Kohler? Is that correct?
It's in the permanent collection of the Kohler. I don't know if it's really a property of the Art Preserve or the John Michael Kohler Art Center or the Kohler Foundation. I can never figure out what's going on with their
Sure.
organization, but it
Yeah.
is it is up there on permanent display. It was just displayed last year in an exhibit, along with some of Seymour's photos, which it chokes me up to think that they were paired together.
Yeah,
But
that's
I
so
was just going
cool.
to mention, last little detail on the model was Bud Goldstein was invited to come to Houston around 1998 or nine. He had just wrapped up his book that he and his wife wrote on the history of the towers, and so the Orange Show invited Bud to give a presentation, a lecture here, and I had wrapped up my model. So I took my model to this public auditorium where his talk was given, and Bud glued on the last little heart
Oh,
onto the wall of the model. So
cool. That's great.
I was always been that's always been very special to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that your model, it's incredible. I showed it to a couple of my students a couple of years ago and I said, "Hey, do you think you guys can make something like this?" They were like, "Yeah." So I bought them all this spaghetti and then within a day or two they're like, "I don't think we can do this, Mr." I was like, "All right. Well, hey, we thought about it." I was up at Kohler last year, and I is just completely blown away. It's one of the two or three places, museums and collections that has just completely, again, thinking about this religious experience. It was the International Folk Art Museum in Santa Fe, the Folk
Yeah.
Art Museum in New York, and then like the preserve in Sheboygan, which was incredible. When I was there, I did not realize this, but you have such a great relationship with. I got to see his work, Dr. Charles
Oh my
Smith.
God. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit? Because again, as we had talked, it's all about the stories of these artists and their works, and you've had a special bond with him. So if you don't mind sharing a story or two about
Oh,
Dr.
sure.
Charles.
I'd love to. I'd be honored to. Again, yet again, I'm going to get choked up in talking about Doc.
I swear
So,
that's not my goal, but if you do, hey, it's great. Go ahead.
So I first became aware of Dr. Smith. I think some images of his work was published in an Intuit newsletter, out of Chicago. Back then it was named the Intuit, the Center for Outsider and Visionary
Visionary
Art. I
art.
believe
Yep,
they
I think
kind of
so.
switched that around now. So they had quarterly newsletters, and his site had been documented. This was his original environment in Aurora, Illinois,
Hmm.
outside of Chicago, and I was just blown away. I mean, these were black and white images, but I thought, oh my God, I need to go here as soon as I can. So, in just like a year or so later, in 1990, summer of 1990, actually might have been the summer of 2000. Kind of same thing. I flew into a hub city. I think I flew into Chicago, rented a car, and one of the first stops was meet. And I'd already been in contact with Doc by phone, saying, "Hey,
Hmm.
I'm interested in your art. I'm going to come out. Can I come please visit?" And he
Hmm.
said, "Of course." And so I could not believe it. I mean, the Aurora site was jaw dropping with a capital J and a capital
Yeah,
D,
yeah, right, right.
and it was just one of those just spine tingling, goose pimply moments.
Hmm.
Um, so do and I obviously struck up a friendship with Dr. Smith.
Hmm.
And so just like 2 years later, to backtrack, I had been part of the committee for the Orange Show volunteer committee, their public tour program. It's
Yeah.
called Eye
Yeah.
Opener Tours, and initially it consisted of tours just within the city of Houston, typically on a Sunday afternoon, about 4, maybe 5 times a year. And we were seeing not just art, but we were seeing like historic places of worship or cemeteries or
Hmm.
art collections. So but eventually we got worked up enough courage to start doing out of town tours in the later in the mid 1990s. And by 2001, I felt courageous enough to say, "Hey, I might be interested in leading one of these out of town tours."
Hmm.
And so my proposal was, of course, the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, with Chicago as a fly into place. And so it was those out of town tours are almost always held over Memorial Day weekend, starting on a Thursday and ending up on flying back to Houston on Memorial Day.
Hmm.
So again, since I'm an architect, I said, okay, we're not going to go to Chicago and Wisconsin without seeing some architecture too. So
Hmm.
I threw in, Frank Lloyd Wright in Oak Park, Louis Sullivan, Johnson Wax Building, et cetera, et cetera. But the main destinations for the group was Dickeyville Grotto
Yep.
and Forever Tron and Kohler that first trip.
Yep.
And as we made our way back to Chicago on day 4, we were that destination was Dr. Charles Smith's African American Heritage Museum and Black Veterans Archive in Aurora. And I'll never forget. So this is a coach bus. We probably had close to 30 people on board. I'd seen the site before, but and I think I led up to it and I said, well, I've talked to Dr. Smith, and since I visited, he's added a few more sculptures, but let's just act nice and just talk highly of those sculptures. But I knew what they were going to be seeing in just a few seconds. So that bus turned a street corner, and then bam, you were just. I mean, it was a full spectrum
Uh-huh.
of sculpture and art, and there Dr. Smith was standing at the corner. And
Amazing.
the great thing was the entire bus together went, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like choreographed. Couldn't have been better.
Yeah, I mean, I was only lucky enough to see his work at the Preserve, and it all just overwhelming in the best possible way. So I
Right.
can't even imagine being on a coach bus and turning the corner, and there it being. It's so great. Something about that. Those tours sound incredible, and I think I don't know if you even intended this, but like that contrast between these Frank Lloyd Wright, these masters of architecture, and then these self-taught environments. There's something to that. It's just that
There
contrast would have
definitely
been
was something
just
to that.
so beautiful. To see those side by side on the same tour, just incredible.
One of my favorite stories about that tour, and this was after that, I think it was the initial Chicago tour. One of the Orange Show or tour veterans, she had been on a number of our in town tours. She signed up for this out of town and she invited her boyfriend along. I'd never met him before. Met him at the airport when we were, departing Houston. Introduced himself, got into a conversation, and it turns out he was worked, on an offshore oil rig.
Hmm.
And he was a nice guy, but then I'm in my head, I'm thinking, we're going to be 5 days of going to museums and house, right houses, so on and so forth. Not that I'm assuming anything, but I'm thinking, I wonder if seems like a good buy. I wonder if he's going to be bored with this after a few days. So I just had my concerns.
Sure.
Anyway, when we landed back in Houston on day on late Memorial Day, he was the first one that approached me. He said, Larry, where are we going next year?
Oh, that's great. That's so good. Yeah. That's
And
amazing.
that's what made me want to continue. It was a lot of work. It was a
Yeah.
volunteer and there was a heck of a lot of planning involved. But that's what drove me is just that
Hmm.
drive. It's like, and
Yeah.
I love the connection between the tour participant and the artist. That was always magical because in many cases they purchased artwork, which is good for both parties. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, there's something to that. We talked about how when you go to these art environments, these spaces, we're both kind of like, why isn't everybody here? This
Yeah, yeah,
is like
yeah.
the greatest place in the world. And I mean, when people do eventually go, right? They do have that experience. They do respect that space and they see how incredible it is. I've taken my children, my wife, my family, my parents on many of these dirt paths and I think after the first couple they're like, oh, where are we going again? But now it's to the point where we're going to LA next week, and my parents the other day said, all right, well, when do we go, what day do you want to go to Watts Towers? I think last time I told you it might just be me sneaking off by
Right.
myself, but they're like, my parents are like, when are we going to Watts Towers? We wouldn't go with you, like, let's go check this out. So yeah, that's so cool to hear, and that's why I thought like sharing some of these art environments with my students, my high school students.
Right.
I thought, maybe it could connect with them and just to see the power of you don't have to go to school to create a once in a generation type art piece. So,
Well, a funny story related to that, also related to the tours. I can't remember where we were going, but you always have to make hotel reservations in advance for these tours. And
mhm,
so we were going to see, it might have been one of the grottos. So we were, we knew that we were going to be spending the night in some small town. So I call
mhm,
ahead, reservations, etc. And the person on the other end said, "Well, that's great that you're bringing, 30 people to town. Can I ask what you're coming here for?" He says, "Well, we're going to visit, whatever it was, the grotto." And they said, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that. I went once, years ago, but I haven't been
yeah.
back since." I thought, "Oh my
I
God."
know. I know. When you drive into like West Bend, Iowa, I'm always like so jealous of these people. I'm like, you live like
Yeah.
half a block away
Uh-huh.
from the Grotto of the Redemption. And yeah, they're like, yeah, we've been there once or
Yeah.
twice. On that note, when people do go visit these environments, I'm hoping that, I'm calling this Art Environment Summer. I've got, a couple of these interviews lined up with you and Joe Farb and Ricky. Um, what is the best way for people to, I don't know about experience or support? Like, what do you recommend when you go to these spaces? How can people support the mission and the artist and sometimes again the artists um like SP Dinsmore are long gone. You can still see Mr. Dinsmore.
Here's a toast to Mr. Dinsmore. We'll click
Yeah, a
mug
toast
click.
to Mr. Dinsmore. You can still see him. He is
Right.
there.
Yeah, he is
Um,
literally there.
he is there as I asked I think he was probably 3 at the time. I asked my youngest son, I'm like, do you want to go see this guy? He's like, I think so. And we all went in there and we saw Mr. Dinsmore. But like, what is the best way to support these environments and these
Well,
artists when we go visit?
well, what I always encourage either friends who aren't familiar with this, who may be traveling to these places for the first time, what I always encourage is don't treat this as some item on a checklist.
Hmm.
Revisit again and engage with either the artist or the caretakers, because one of the reasons I say revisit is the environments can change throughout this a year, obviously, with different
Hmm.
seasons. If a environment is still under construction, still in progress, it's going to mutate and change
Yeah.
and grow. Do you want to take a quick detour at this point? I'll
Sure.
talk
Yeah.
about growth and change.
Yeah.
So, and this ties back to my when I was building the model of the towers. And so again, Bud Goldstone and Seymour were supplying me with all these great vintage photos. And I just received a packet of one, and there were some photos from, I don't know, call it the 1930s. And so I called up, it was either Bud or Seymour. I said, "What's going on here? I'm looking at this photo from 1930, but the main wall is totally different. And these two first towers are totally different." And they said, "Yeah, Rodia was editing." So we don't have the cliche in most people's minds is an artist, especially a self-taught artist, kind of just obsessively putting one thing on top of another,
Yeah.
without just this almost weird
Right.
obsession. But no, they were editing, and that's a key
Yeah.
thing as artists, that they were changing things, because these early photos, the wall, like I said, the main wall, he totally tore down portions of it, totally tore down portions of these smaller towers and rebuilt it because he didn't like the way they looked.
Yeah.
And that was this kind of mind blowing. Even though I had at that point I'd already been seeing these environments, for me that was like a wow, moment.
Yeah.
Um,
And to that point, I mean, unlike art museum, like these spaces are changing. They're
Yeah,
evolving,
right.
and every time you go visit, you go to a museum, you see a Van Gogh. It's the same Van Gogh it was last year, but these can be different. And also, that's really important. You talked about how he's editing. It's like I think there are so many misconceptions about some of these artists. Again, self-taught, they didn't go to art school or
Right.
whatever. Reading a little bit in this book, like that they're a recluse, or that they don't want to be involved in the community, or again, they're not talented and they're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But like they are really, a place I think you've been a couple of times, Ed Galloway's
Oh yeah, totem
Totem
pole.
Poles, right?
Yeah,
Like he
sure.
was also just like an incredible woodworker.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you can
He
go
made those
into his,
incredible violins that
yeah,
are on display.
yeah. And his story is incredible because he was a teacher and he was getting a
I
lot of
think.
those sent to him from a lot
Uh-huh.
of his students who had joined the military, went off to war, and they were sending him wood from all parts of the world, and he was making those. So yeah, just really really great. Thank you for sharing some of those details. I do want to ask, as I want to respect your time, and I want to
Sure. I got plenty of time this morning.
okay, cool. Thank you. And again, we could talk forever. Um you and I know there are these impossible questions, and I almost feel bad asking them, but I also like to maybe put you on the spot a little bit. I'm not going to ask you your favorite place, but do you have
I can
any
name my two
idea?
favorites.
Your two favorite would be Watson Orange
Watson Orange Show.
Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. But do you have any idea how many art environments you have visited
Well, that's a good
in your
question.
lifetime?
I do know on the map that I keep updated of current art environments in the U.S. There's like 422 listed, 425. Some are very simple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Size more kind. A few sculptures in the art.
But
But
you've been
anyway,
there, you've cataloged them. I mean, yeah, that's
but
yeah.
I have not come anywhere close to visiting that. I've maybe been to, oh, I don't even know. Probably maybe half of those.
Okay.
And
A
I did a
couple
lot
hundred.
more. I haven't done so much traveling the past 10, 15 years. I've always had lousy eyesight, even as a kid, and it's gotten a little bit lousier in my older age. So I don't drive on freeways, interstates much any longer. But I do a lot of planning now. As okay, how can I get to Lucas on a bus, or take
Hmm.
fly here, take Amtrak there, and then go, or wherever,
Hey,
and I can get there.
you want to fly up to Des Moines? You can be my navigator anytime. I will
Excellent.
drive all over the Midwest and Kansas. Again, you were kind of mentioning your tours would go to the upper Midwest. I always, when I kind of started getting into this world of art environments a few years ago, I was always kind of jealous because I could never really get out. I had young children. I could never quite get out to like Los Angeles to see Watts Towers. But
Right.
there are so many incredible art environments in the Midwest here. All the grottos. Wisconsin has, so many, so many. So I have been lucky that I have been able to get to some really cool art environments.
And that's how I have always felt, is I'm so darn lucky. I mean, I just
Yeah.
feel so privileged to
Yeah.
have met these artists, seen these just incredible places. I was just going to briefly mention, just when we think it's like, okay, all the great environments have been built, there's just not as many these days with, younger environment builders. But then all of a sudden you hear about, I mean, I didn't hear about Prophet Isaiah's, Second Coming house.
Hmm.
And, that was what, 15 years when that came to everyone's attention.
Yeah.
And that is like one of the all-time greats. Sadly and luckily I got to meet him, but sadly he's gone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Do you ever like drive down the interstate or, go on trips? And I feel like I'm constantly thinking, I'm like, what if like something's in that person's backyard? Or
yeah,
like,
sure,
like
sure.
what if they're just building something we don't even know about yet,
Right.
but they're just building something in their backyard? Because I ran into a neighbor. I wasn't going to plug this, but he's a potter. But he was having a little pottery sale last summer or 2 summers ago, and I stopped and he's like, "Oh, come back tomorrow and I'll show you my backyard." And he's got these incredible totems that he's built out of all these pots, and he's kind of a self-taught. I'm just like,
Right.
"You're right next door to
You're
me.
right
This is
there.
yeah, it's truly incredible." And again, I feel like you do spend a good amount of your time just kind of either on Google Maps or
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
looking at and trying to find because you're always like, anybody been here yet? And
I mean, I know
it's
so many
great.
people out there in the field now, and good friends. It's like, okay, you're going on a road trip. Did you find out anything? Did you discover anything new?
Yeah.
Um,
And to your point earlier too, it's like I swear I've like scoured your website about all the places in the Midwest, and just the other day I'm like, "Oh, wait, there's this place off the road here in Indiana. Like that's not too far from me. I can go there."
uh,
I feel like in the 300-mile radius or so, I feel like I've almost been to all of them, but I'm still like finding new ones and getting to go to them. So it's exciting.
I always say that you really can't go anywhere here or in the States, or you could almost say that around the world without finding a place of magic, within a
Mhm.
day's, a day trip.
Yeah. And these again, it can't be said enough. These art environments are truly magical. I feel like I don't know your religion or whatever, but like it is life changing to some degree. It may
Sure,
not
sure,
be
of course.
you may not become the world's greatest artist after that, but there is a little piece of that continues to blow you away every time you visit. And even again, the same place. I've been to Dickeyville about 5 or 6 times now.
Yeah,
I'm always
yeah.
discovering a new like
Right.
piece of pottery or a new coffee cup that's somewhere I hadn't seen before. So
Well, needless without getting too philosophical, clearly in this world of ours today, it's easy to be cynical, but
hmm
then you thought, oh wait, there is this great place that's still there and still active, and so
yeah.
you can't get too down as long as there are these little beacons of
Yeah.
of
You're
of
right.
hope and wonder around.
You're right. And that's why one reason why, well, many reasons, but as a teacher, summer vacation is always my favorite because I get to spend most of my summers getting to go out to visit some of these places. So I'm very excited, and I truly again appreciate your time, your mentorship, your just sharing all these places with me. Again, I have told as many people that will listen. I have people that reach out to me on Instagram. Hey, I'm flying to so and so. Do you know where I could visit? I say, go to narrowlarry.com. That is your one-stop shop. Spaces is great. If you have to, I guess Roadside America, no offense, but like
No, no offense.
you've got like we said, the catalog to end all catalogs. So just thank you for
Well,
everything that you've
thank you
done.
so much. And before I forget it, I want to acknowledge. I mean, it's a long list of people who I want to thank and want to acknowledge, but the two most important people will always be, again, tied to the Orange Show and the Towers, is Suzanne Tice, who was the founding director of the Orange Show Foundation, because she
Mhm.
put into place these public programs because she knew, and as in working with the main patron who saved the Orange Show, Marilyn Oshman, they knew that this couldn't live as a place that would just be a one-time only visit. They wanted to
Mhm.
give people, the public, a reason to come back. So they initiated, this program of, music events, art workshop events, and
Yeah.
eventually that led to the art car parade. And,
Mhm.
it just on down the list. So Suzanne and then Seymour Rosen, the founder of Spaces. But
Yeah.
there's a long list of giants, and I'm reluctant to start because I'll forget about somebody. But my good friend Kelly Ludwig, Fred Scruton, oh God, Ted Degner. I love Ted Degner's
Oh yeah.
photography.
Yep. Yep.
Um, I mean, Lisa Stone. My God, Lisa Stone, and it's to all those I haven't named. Please, Joe Farb, of course.
And two, like everyone is just the kindest, warmest, like most willing to help and just make sure that you have a great time experiencing these art environments. So
Right.
yeah, it's just a great world to be a part of, and I appreciate you kind of opening it to me and letting me be a part of it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Larry, thank you again for joining me. Always appreciate chatting with you. This was fantastic. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Cheers to Narrow Larry. Thank you to Larry for joining me, for sharing his insight, his wisdom, and all the incredible work he has done in the past few decades documenting these art environments across the country. Please go see an art environment this summer. If I haven't convinced you yet, I don't know what else to do. But please go check out narrowlarry.com. Anytime you are heading anywhere in this country on a road trip, you're flying somewhere, I guarantee you there is an incredible art space not too far from you. It is life changing. I don't know if it's a big life changing or a small, but I swear these spaces are truly, truly one of a kind and are an unforgettable experience. So go check those out. narrowlarry.com. Thanks again to Larry for joining me. Art Environment Summer is coming to a close, maybe? Question mark. We'll see who else maybe we can chat with. But thank you to Joe Farb Hernandez, Ricky Boscarino, and Larry Harris for their conversation, their wisdom, and sharing some fun stories about these art environments that, again, gotta see them to believe them. Just go check them out, please. And then send me pictures because I love seeing them too. That is all for Folk Artwork and Friends today. But you better believe there is more coming because we are on summer vacation. Until next time, please like, subscribe, leave a review, comment, share with a friend. Please, thank you. It means the world to me. Having a blast doing this. Talk to you later. There's those balloons. And thank you to Jason Brown for the Folk Artwork and Friends theme song and all the interstitials. So many great little ditties that he put together for me. I can't thank him enough. Go check out more original music from Jason at sapwood.bandcamp.com. Buy an album. Support folk musicians like Jason. Thank you again, friend. Can't thank you enough. You are the best. The folks at Traub Publishing are offering 15% off to anybody who would like to purchase this book. The promo code AF15. If you would like to purchase this book, put that in. Go to traubpublishing.com. You can click the link below. AF15 will get you 15% off this fantastic book written by Joe Farb Hernandez, photos taken by Fred Scruton. You will not be disappointed.